And you're listening to Radio Flange Goblet and the late night drive time all truckers and nothing but truckers hour with me, Marvin Plimsople. That was A Wailing Heart by Johnny Gangley and the Couplets, going all the way out to Route 56 and Benny and the Jets. Alan, Simon, Grant, Pip, Knobley, the 12 Dawson twins, of course, Vince the Thumbs Vermicelli, Coughing Dave, Sneezing Dave, the Dead Sisters, Marcus Truncheon and his gammy head, not forgetting Leonard the Fist, and all at Truck Stop 8 with a sack full of panicked chickens. I'm going to be taking more requests later, but first, a word from our sponsors. Pageantry. What a great word. We'll be having a whole sentence from our sponsors later when we've picked through the rubble of that collapsed ice cream truck in the front garden and found some more of them. Just time then for a few weather warnings. Outside Fort Wayne, Indiana, there is a flood flashing alert in effect due to earlier when 15 old-timers in Rainmax went down to the flood and took all their clothes off. In Jefferson City, Missouri, there was a rumor of a possible tornado after the pie-eating contestants at America's third-largest curried egg pie warehouse tucked into the prize of 4 large cans of baked beans. And in Albuquerque, some ducks were knifed in the face. It doesn't say here why or what side effects that will have on the weather, but useful information, I'm sure, nonetheless. Here's a message for Barry and Tina out there plugging away through the night on the ice road to Nowhereville, Alaska. Your mother says, can she have her spleen back, please? She only meant to let you borrow it for that strangest children's birthday party you crashed in order to eat all the pudding, but now it's beginning to get all sore and reddish, and she fears it won't be long before she needs to see a specialist, or indeed an undertaker. And a quick one now, just to Sid in the Flying Devil Pig Big Rig in Gripe, Maine. Your hair has been located and is being held by someone who will only identify themselves as the Satchel. They say please put $50,000 in non-sequential bills under the 4th chair along back row of screen 2 of the AMC Lowe's in New Brunswick by Thursday if you ever want to see your hair again. They will start sending broken follicles and photographs of bald children to you if you don't comply. And now our next request. It comes from Seth, Nicholas, Dodgy Eric, Minor Jeff, Touchy McPantaloon IV, and the Swings Both Way crew out by the stadium, and they'd like to hear the sweet, smooth sounds of the after-movie diner. Well, ladies, that can be arranged.
No, it was bigger. It was definitely bigger before. No, before you looked at it. No, don't touch it. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the After Movie Diner. And you're right, it is a week, it is an episode, and this is me. Now, before we start in on the main body of the show, which is a right corker, I have to tell you, we've just got this wonderful email I'd like to read. Cue the email jingle. Eliza Dushku, why? No, this is not the email jingle. I have no idea what this is, but it's not an email jingle, is it? Well, has it mentioned mail at any point in the song so far? No. So let's stop this and put on the email jingle. Yeah, thank you. Here comes the postman. I wonder what he has for me. There's something in his big brown sack. I wonder what could it be. Well, I hope the bills it lacks and instead brings me some listener feedback, or maybe, just maybe, a big bag of crack. Oh, here comes the postman. I wonder what he has for me. No, it's smaller now. It's even smaller than when you were looking at it before. What? Blow on it. Hi, yes, this week we did actually receive some mail. Fantastic. And the mail we received was from a Mr. Andy Lunn. And Andy Lunn writes, Hi, I've been an on and off listener to the AMD podcast for a little while. I apologise for this. I will become more committed in the future. Yes, please do, Andy, otherwise we'll send round our evil gnomes and they'll take care of you. Anyway, he goes on to say, anyhow, I noticed from your letterboxed list of movies covered by AMD that you did an episode last year on one of my favourite movies of all time, Mona Lisa. That's the Bob Hoskins one. I've loved that movie since I saw it on Channel 4 on a little black and white TV I had in my bedroom as a youngster. You can picture it, can't you? You can almost picture the sights and sounds or smells of Andy Lunn as a youngster watching Mona Lisa on a black and white television. That's why I love this email. He goes on to say, as the years have gone by, it's remained a favourite and is often in my top 5 films, although these do change. It's certainly my favourite British film of all time. Anyway, whenever I mention or recommend the movie to other people, one of 2 things usually happen. A, they've never heard of it, or B, they think I mean Mona Lisa Smile. Why would anyone think that? Only morons would think that, and I think next time someone thinks that, Andy, you should probably say, you know what, you're a bit of a moron. He finishes up by saying, it was so refreshing, therefore, to hear you both enthuse about this movie, and I'm really glad it's not just me that holds it in such high esteem. A few years back, I took my very understanding wife on a trip around all the locations, and we even stayed at the hotel in Brighton from the finale. Odd, I know. It's such a great film, despite Phil Bastard Collins, and I'm so pleased that you did your best to encourage everyone to watch it. Best wishes. Well, in all seriousness, Andy, that was a fantastic email. Thanks for writing in. I do urge everyone to write in to aftermoviediner@gmail.com. Tell me how you first found out about the show. Tell me one of the shows you like. Tell me one of the shows you don't like. Cut me down to size. Say that I'm a waste of space. Say that I'm just pointlessly putting myself out there for nothing more than just a need for wanton attention. Do whatever you need to do, but please do write in to aftermoviediner@gmail.com or I won't stop sobbing. And now, after these messages, the main body of the show.
Are you fighting with your inner self? Can you decide to commit without guilt or fear? Are you endlessly searching, tired of what mainstream has to offer? Searching through an endless supply of movies that seem never-ending, each just like the last, nothing jumping out at you, knowing that committing to a crappy movie can take up to 2 hours of your life that you'll never get back. That's where we can help. We're Jason and Sean, and we're Film Reviews from the Basement. We take in as many genre films as possible, leaving a simple, committed rating, good, bad, or ugly, of many of the films you've probably wondered about. We broadcast worldwide twice monthly at www.wecamefromthebasement.com. There, you can find archived episodes, radio shows, and we don't stop there. We're committed to writing reviews and movie news and interviews with actual movie stars, writers, and directors of movies across multiple genres that you've probably heard of. If you're cool like us, or want to be less snooty or less pretentious, come find us at www.wecamefromthebasement.com. This has been a public service announcement from Jason and Sean.
I can't urge you enough to listen to the Schlock Treatment Podcast with
Mark McDonald,
Doug Fry, Matt Ringler,
and
Kirk Howie.
They are a schlock and B-movie podcast to review films currently available to view on Netflix so that you never need to feel left out. It's a fantastically funny show done by a great bunch of guys, most of whom currently have beards. If that doesn't sell it to you, then nothing will, and you're cold dead inside. So, every Saturday, check out Schlock Treatment on iTunes or schlocktreatment.com.
Hey guys, what's up? Matt Ringler from the Schlock Treatment Podcast. We make good stuff out of bad movies, just for you.
Hi there, I'm a Gumbo, and I'm with the Traumatic Cinematic Show. We're a podcast that talks about films. Yeah, we'd like to invite you to come listen to our show. You can find us at traumaticcinematic.com. You can also find us on Twitter at DC Podcast Crew. Also, you should come over and check out our Podomatic page, traumaticcinematic.podomatic.com. We're also on Facebook, so you can come on out there and find us too. I'm on the internet.
Excuse me, what are you doing? Are you looking for porn again?
No.
Well, what is that I see?
It's not porn. It's the badassboobsandbodycounts.com website. I happen to be looking at the reviews in the boobs section of the site.
They have a section of the site dedicated to boobs?
Yes, they do. They cover exploitation films in the boobs category, action films in the badass category, and horror in the body counts category.
What's that other option, BB and BC podcast?
If you're not into reading the reviews, you can listen to them via the web on your mobile device through iTunes, and they cover the same types of films: lesser known action, exploitation, and horror cinema. So yeah, to answer your question, I wasn't cruising porn.
That's too bad.
What's too bad?
That you weren't cruising for porn.
Why?
Because I was feeling kind of horny.
Oh, wait, get back here. Hey, get back here.
Well, Well, you know what that means, don't you? Yes, it's Friday the 13th, and every Friday the 13th you'll find me, John Cross, over at profondo-cinema.blogspot.com discussing with the hosts of Profondo Cinema, Axel and J. Scott, the Friday the 13th franchise. And in fact, an episode just dropped in time for September Friday the 13th, which was episode 149, which covered Friday the 13th's Part 6 and 7. We did some episodes last year, and that episode just dropped. If you want to hear all the episodes, please go to profondo-cinema.blogspot.com, and under labels on the right-hand side of the page, click on my name, that's John Cross, and you will be able to see and listen to all the episodes that in which we have covered the Friday the 13th franchise. So please go to profondo-cinema.blogspot.com and do it today. Do it! Well, welcome back to the After Movie Diner this week, and it's a special and exciting episode because it's tentatively our last final Woods and Weller episode of our epic Woods and Weller series that has spanned the globe in terms of attention and interest. But with me tonight, my guest, Baron Upton Thursby, described him as one of the most foremost backgammoneers of his generation, going on to tell me, but whatever you do, don't leave him anywhere near your fridge. The man is a bloody animal for baked ham. He's a science fiction author of some note, although his editor is still trying to find all his notes, and he makes a mean mini pancake. Ladies and germs, will you please put it firmly together and rub it about a bit for Mr. Jon Wallace?
Thank you. You're marvellous.
Yes. So have you been, Squire? You all good?
I am all good. We've been. This has actually been my best ever. I think it probably is my best ever cinema year in terms of pure visits. We've really ramped up our cinema trips this year. And
tell us what you've been seeing. Let's do some John's ones just while we've got you on the line.
The funny thing is that every time I try and think about what I've seen, I sort of go, what did I see? Because there's a lot of sort of, things just merging into one another.
It's John's ones, it's John's ones. They're the one of films we want to review. Yeah, it's John's ones.
I saw Star Trek 2. That was quite a while ago now. What was the last one that I saw? Oh, yeah, I went to see Alpha Papa.
Yeah, which, of course, has not been given a US release date. Well, not on my last look, anyway, which was a couple of weeks ago now, but has not been given a US release date. So, which is odd, because I would have... I mean, I know maybe the character is not so popular, but obviously Coogan has a little bit of an international presence in terms of an actor, and I know that Stiller and his ilk love Alan Partridge and Coogan in general. So
yeah, I mean, I think the thing that is great about it, but will count against it with the States, is that they did a really brave and very cool thing, which was because they said there's some good interviews with Iannucci about it. Actually, Armando Iannucci, who works with Steve Coogan on a lot of Alan Partridge, and he was basically saying, we didn't want to do like a taking Alan to America kind of a thing.
Right.
And it's all in Norwich. It's all unbelievably English. There's a lot of sort of references that I think a lot of American people just wouldn't get. And I think that's quite brave. But what I liked about it, I have to say, I don't think it was it's no Life of Brian, but it's good. It's good and it makes you laugh. And it was such a relief to go and see it in many ways, because I was so thinking, don't be shit.
Yeah.
Because I love Alan Partridge. I was thinking, do not be shit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It was good.
No, but I mean, I think that not only is the world obviously smaller with technology and so on and so forth, but I know just from living in the States that Netflix has opened the door to a lot of British stuff. And obviously not Norwich specific or not like minutiae little English type stuff, but enough that people over here are certainly getting more used to the accent and more used to the pop culture and more used to the comedians and things like that. And, I was going to bring up The World's End, which I saw recently as part of the Cornetto Trilogy. I saw all three back to back in the theatre, and it was reminding me again. Obviously, I've been steeped far more in American culture for the last few years living here, but it reminded me again that those movies, although obviously the genre of each one is kind of American, zombie, action, and then sci-fi in its taste, the jokes and the references and the lifestyle and so on and so forth is very English, right up until the point they're calling it the Cornetto Trilogy when really they don't have cornettos over here, and they don't ultimately have an equivalent either. It, was quite fun and brave, and they went around and explaining what they were. But, there's a lot of references in The World's End to pubs and pub culture, obviously. Yeah. That just doesn't, pub culture doesn't exist as it does in England, in America at all. Theirs is more of a bar culture or a diner culture. And so, I think if that works and Alpha Papa having the action, side to it as well, I don't know. It should get a release. Really, but I understand that argument, you know what I mean? But it's really nice to see, one of the sad things about The World's End I was going to talk about was that, I watch a lot of the press screenings and interviews and things like that with the guys afterwards. And obviously since Fuzz and Sean came out, Peg especially has gone from sort of strength to strength in terms of being an actor appearing in big budget stuff. Obviously Star Trek you mentioned, and he was in Mission Impossible 3, and he's done a few kind of softball rom-coms out in the States as well. And it, I have to say, as much as I love Spaced and I love the Cornetto Trilogy and I love Big Train and so on, Peg's I don't know, Peg is one that really bothers me right now. He's become a proper, I don't know if you saw any of the footage of him, but and I don't know if he's had hair plugs or is wearing a weave or what it is, but he's had some Hollywood thing done to his hair, man. And I understand he's got to an age, he's got to make a career and blah, 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 and he's in these big franchises now and so on, but I don't know, there's something, when you look at the Hot Fuzz press tour that they did around the States, and there's a video of it on the Hot Fuzz DVD, it's got that pals together, anarchic sense of humour, very English, and isn't this all silly that we're doing this and blah, 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 blah. Looking at the World's End press tour, it's been the movie's great. The movie's great. I'm not talking down the movie at all. But the press tour has been really depressing because Peg is being an unbelievable, just dreary, stone-faced, serious lovey. Right.
Oh, really? Blimey, I had no idea.
And to be fair, a bit of a pretentious wanker where before he would have kind of laughed at it, he sort of, and there's been some humour. I don't want to knock him completely, but comes across as a bit of an egomaniac. And Edgar Wright looks like he just doesn't want to be there. Look, Edgar Wright just looks like, I don't want to be doing it. The only one who looks like he's still enjoying it and still wants, the only one who even talks about still being pals with him is Nick Frost. And you kind of feel a bit, because he hasn't got as much to lose, I guess, as the other two. Wright's now in bed with Marvel. He's going to be eventually making Ant-Man. And Peg is obviously, onwards and upwards with J.J. Abrams. But it's very depressing to watch. The movie, on the other hand, was great. The movie, on the other hand, was not a disappointment. It was everything you wanted. It was far better than the trailer let on, because it was worrying, the trailer, because it looked like they'd given everything away.
No, I was going to say that the trailer kind of put me off a bit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think the marketing of the movie was shocking. I think the marketing of the movie was shockingly bad. I mean, having seen it, I'm not sure what you could have emphasised more than what they did, because they've got to get bums on seats, so therefore the sci-fi action element of the movie, which is a large part of it, has to obviously be there. But, the movie is far more it's far more serious, far more emotional, far more an actual sci-fi movie. I heard a very good analysis of it where Shaun of the Dead is a comedy film that happens to have zombies in it, and Hot Fuzz is a comedy murder mystery that happens to have action in it, But World's End is a proper sci-fi idea. It's a proper metaphor for today and a proper sci-fi idea to do with today's society. Now I'll shut up and let you go.
Yeah, I know. I can totally see that. I mean, what I've got to say as well. I mean, this is off the modern releases thing. But the other day, I was at home alone, and they showed Shaun of the Dead, and I had not seen Shaun of the Dead since I'd first seen it. I realised when I started watching it. So that's the second time I've ever watched it.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I realised that the reason why it's the second time I ever watched it, I remembered that when I first saw it, I have to admit, I didn't think it was very good. And I'm amazed at myself that I didn't think it was very good, because watching it again, I thought, this is really good. It's really, like, I can't tell you, because so many people have seen it a million times and written quite a lot about it. And all that I experienced with that film was going in with these sky-high, like, spaced, big train expectations for the film, of it being this, like, utter masterwork of... Because I really thought that stuff was just perfect, spaced and big train. And his performances in that stuff are just amazing as well. And the range, you know... I suppose what it was is when I watched it, I thought, well, they haven't... I'm not getting to see Simon Pegg do loads of different mad stuff, and it's not quite as like jumpy about and you know, impressions and. But watching it again and thinking, but it's just doing one thing. It does it as in it's just doing the zombie thing instead of leaping all over the place from genre to genre like Spaced or being just completely fucking mad by Big Train. I just thought it was great, and so and you know what? I don't think I've even seen Hot Fuzz the whole way through. I hate to admit that, but I don't think I've seen Hot Fuzz the whole way through. And I think I will go back to it now. And I'm not saying it will be. I think it'd be half as good as Shaun of the Dead. But I was so struck by why didn't I like this when it first came out. I'm sure it's for the reasons I said. But I agree that he has turned something else, because I saw him interviewed. I think it was on Top Gear or something like that. And I thought, oh, you've changed, Peg. I didn't really hold it against him. I don't hold it against him because. Well, I just don't. I love him. I love that body of work he did too much. But I did think, you have changed a bit, yeah. Whereas the good thing about Alpha Papa is that, you know, Coogan, who has the most, you know, like, because Peg always seems just like a nice person, and Coogan, you imagine, is probably quite a sort of nasty piece of work sometimes, or completely out of his mind, is sort of bagging all kinds of women and all this sort of thing, and very dirty. But it's really very high quality. Alpha Papa, and it's not roll around in the arse funny like a really good Monty Python film, but it is good. And so I'm glad The World's End is good, because maybe I'll give that a go as well. Yeah, I mean
the other thing that's sad about it is, I mean, obviously they've tentatively said in interviews, oh yeah, we'll work together again, but honestly, when you come out of The World's End, and certainly seeing them as a trilogy as a whole, like I did a couple of weeks back. What strikes you, and also bear in mind, I've seen most of what Peg's done in terms of, you know, How to Lose Friends and Alienate People, Run, Fat Boy, Run, Paul, those films. I've seen Scott Pilgrim, which I didn't like, which was Edgar Wright's directorial thing. I have not seen Attack the Block, which has Nick Frost in it, but I've always held him in high regard. I imagine it's good, and I imagine he's good in it. But I have to say that them only doing occasional films together, and, you know, the more Pegg gets on the Hollywood train and Wright gets on the Hollywood train, you know, Wright's already got 3 movies listed that he's going to be working on over the next 5 years. You know, it's going to be 5 to 10 years before we see another one of these guys. And it's kind of like Raimi, Tapper, and Bruce in terms of their best work is together. And while I understand them wanting to go off and do other stuff, and, you know, as a creative person, blah, 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 as an audience member, it's just never going to be as good. They're just not as good apart. Now, Pegg, like you say, back in the day on Big Train, could do a ton of stuff, but he's never going to be given those roles to do a ton of stuff because he's trying to carve his niche out as a leading man. You know what I mean? So he's never going to be given the quirky British friend role or whatever. And why would he want it, to be fair? They're just not good roles written out there. And it's very bittersweet, The World's End, because part of you is like, oh man, and I don't mean do more where there's genre films, but part of you is like, oh man, have I really got to sit around and wade through the next 10 years of half-arsery just to wait for the next one where they all get together and make a movie, and then I'm like, oh great, excellent. Because when they write a script together, they put so much effort into it, they put so much layers into it, there's so many interwoven ideas and characters and plot points and all the rest of it that they work really hard on. You just don't see that in their other stuff. I mean, Paul was woeful. Paul was woefully bad, and I've tried watching it 3 times. It's just horrible. So
yeah, I haven't seen Paul. But anyway. On the sci-fi subject, the other things I've seen have been very much in that ilk. So the other ones I've seen recently is Elysium, Wolverine, World War Z.
What did you think of? I mean, very quickly because I have covered them. But what did you think of Elysium, the Wolverine, and World War Z? All of which I've seen. World
War Z, I thought, sort of was just the most bog standard thing I've ever seen, and I'm amazed that because it's one of those things where you read about you're so confused after seeing it, going like, what was all the big fuss about then? That right. you go and read about it and then go, oh right, so it's a really good book that they just didn't adapt. they went like, oh, we'll do this really great. Brad Pitt read the book and obviously completely blew him away or whatever, and he bought it and went, oh, I'll make a film of it, and then sat down with a load of people for a year and went, we don't really see how we can make this your vehicle, Brad. And he went, well, I do. That's by making a completely different film. I mean, as far as I can make out. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of other stuff filmed and it was all thrown out. And it just feels like that. It just feels like a big, messy lump. And I'm very surprised at it. Because for me, the whole, switching the ending and stuff like that, I mean, never mind the ending. The whole, going to Korea thing, that was all completely random. The Israel thing was really random. The Israel thing was also really noticeably, lacked. Oh wow! So they build a big wall, fine. But in the film, I don't know about the book, but in the film, there's no comment on that at all. It's just there, and the wall is this sort of great protective thing. And you're like, sorry, but the problems in Israel, it's not good enough to build a huge wall and then to not have anything to say about it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, completely.
You're just like that's. So the whole film was just a bit of a waste of time, as far as I'm concerned.
It was just it was a movie made by a very boring committee. It was drivel. I mean, it was fine, but like you say, utterly average. I mean, utterly average.
Exactly. Everything about it was just super, super average, and so you just came out just going out.
And he was terrible in it. I mean, he looked asleep. I wanted someone to prod him with a stick. Be like, wake up and take that hipster scarf off, you fucking
Yeah, well, prick. I have to say, having just watched the Jimmy Woods movie we're about to cover, I have something to say about people acting asleep, because there are certain scenes in that film. Jesus Christ. But Elysium was quite a weird one for me, because I don't know what you thought about it, right? But I thought it looked absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
It had some really good ideas in it. I even thought at the beginning, wow, they seem to have given Matt Damon quite an interesting character here. He seems to be this sort of bloke who's happy-go-lucky no matter how much he gets sort of beaten over the head.
Yeah.
But he seems to have this sort of block-headed enthusiasm about everything that just can't be beaten out of him. And then it just was beaten out of him. Then there's characters in it like Sharlto Copley, is that his name? Where he is just absolutely, he's munching that space.
He is amazing. When he wasn't on screen, I was not interested in the slightest.
He was really, really amazing. But at the same time, he was amazing in spite of not really having much of a character, really. And what was really, really striking about it was the whole thing about going up to the space station and making everyone a citizen. I mean, it didn't make sense in a million different ways. It really didn't really make any sense. And it sort of undermined its own social message by refusing to accept that the reason that all these people have gone up to the space station in the first place is because the overpopulation has made it impossible for any kind of standard to be had on life. So simply sending down a few shuttles at the end and go, oh, well, now we'll hand out free medical care. No, that's the whole point, that they've gone up to the space because they can't provide free medical care to everyone. They're just up in the... Do you know what I mean? It just sort of... For me, it just made its own message a bit random. But the main thing about it was a real lack of characters in it.
Yeah.
Especially bringing in... Having that big statement thing, because, my wife turned to me while we were watching it when Jodie Foster comes on and went like, wow, it's Jodie Foster, because we hadn't watched any trailers or anything for it. I'm very careful not to. She was like, wow, it's Jodie Foster. And you bring in a heavyweight like Jodie Foster and give her the most bog standard sort of, villain role. But with not even the most, like Goldfinger-esque, like sprinkling of motivation. Do you know what I mean? There were not even Goldfinger standard did she have. No. It was just, I'm a bit evil and I wear a power suit in this big space station and no one's landing on my space station. Like, that was it.
Moonraker would probably be a better example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was just really weird. I thought it was a very strange film because it was absolutely stunning and it did have some really good ideas in it. And it was really, really entertaining. I have to say, it was really, really entertaining. It kept going the whole way through it. And like I keep saying, a film gets at least a 6 out of 10 from me, merely for holding my attention the entire way through it, because that has become so rare.
Agreed.
But it was very, very strange how bad the characters were.
I mean, the difficulty is District 9 was such, for me, an amazing debut by Blomkamp. I've seen District 9 again 2 or 3 times since it came out, and it gets better each time. It's the best blending for me of that sort of B-movie delight, joy, and excitement, coupled with really fun characters in an awesomely realized sci-fi setting. And it just works so well. And therefore, Elysium was always going to be a tough act to follow. Now, fair enough, he's gone for, yet again, social metaphor, splashing about inside a massive sci-fi landscape. And in that regard, again, like you said, was successful because it was beautiful. The message was fine, although obviously there are holes to be picked in anything like that. But it was fine. And it certainly wasn't the sort of 99%, 1% Occupy Wall Street argument that I thought it was going to be from the trailer. It was far more about healthcare and stuff, which is sort of tied to the same thing, but still interesting. But I had 2 major problems with it. One is the character, like you said. Matt Damon had nothing to work with. And if World War Z and Elysium are put together for any reason at all, it's that both Matt Damon and Brad Pitt have proven themselves, to me anyway, to be interesting actors when they get the right script. And in both of these movies, which I thought were perfectly fine put together, neither Pitt nor Damon did anything at all of any worth. And it's so noticeable that while you're right, Sharlto Copley's character is something straight out of a, bog standard pulp sci-fi thing. He's the part robotic, part human assassin, wanders around until he needs to be let off the leash kind of thing. Considering he had nothing more than really, that as a guideline, he was phenomenally good. And all I wanted was Sharlto Copley to be going around the place, killing people. Yeah. But the problem was, the only second problem I had with the film was that the fight scenes were atrociously filmed. Atrocious. Everything else was beautiful, well filmed. They kept the camera back. They didn't shake it around too much. The moment there were fight scenes, and Damon's capable of doing the fight scenes, Sharlto had a damn good go, the camera's waving all over the place. I mean, I sat kind of far away from the screen. I still couldn't see what the fuck was going on. And I know everyone thinks it's some stylistic choice, but it is getting so grating. I mean, it completely and utterly derailed Man of Steel for me, and I'm not going off on that rant again. And it came very close to derailing Elysium for me. People have got to learn to put a fucking camera on a tripod. It just got to, man. It's ruining so many films.
I don't know. I do agree. But
the film it didn't ruin was the Wolverine, which I thought the fight scenes were very well done in.
Yeah, I mean, Wolverine, I just plumb really enjoyed. I just thought it totally barreled along. I was listening to your X-Men podcast, actually, which I thought was interesting because I think it shows that there are a lot of different opinions out there about X-Men and what are the best films and all that sort of thing. And also, what I'd never really thought of before until I listened to those podcasts, even though it's so manifestly obvious, is that they focus so much on Wolverine in absolutely everything all the time. And aren't we all getting a bit sick of Wolverine? And it's funny, I've never really thought of it that way, and I never really have. And I went along to this film going, I'm totally up for something a bit cool. I remember seeing the trailer and going, oh, that looks kind of okay. And I know it's got some, just the most lazy, done a million times plot things in it, like, loses his powers, regains his powers. This boy, has that been done? But it was all going splendidly well until the end, and then it all completely fell apart at the end in a really sort of messy, rubbish way. But up until then, it was just it was all looking good. It was all a bit Japanese. There were like unbelievably stunning girls in it, being actually quite good. I really, really like the guy who was her dad in it, who has a bit of a weird part, actually, but I love that actor. Loved loads and loads of the actors in it. I thought he was really good in it. Wolverine, I thought he was great. I just thought it's exactly, like I say, it immediately gets a 6 because it held my attention the whole way through, even with the, seducing them in that. I mean, I laughed out loud at one point because there's so much of it is so... it's so formulaic. It's it's absurd. Like there's actually a bit where they're running through the rain towards a cabin at night, and they go into the cabin and you're like, every time I see that kind of stuff, I just go, first of all, I know that I am never going to run through the rain and into a cabin, and it means nothing. It's so of the movies. It's right. Ludicrous, and to do it again. It made me laugh as soon as I saw them running through the rain.
But it was sort of a film where I'm going to say style and ability over substance was okay, in terms of the fact that I completely dug the Japanese movie vibe to the whole thing. Completely dug that.
Loved
the
it.
whole
You have to see 13 Assassins, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
That's the Takashi Miike movie.
The coolest Japanese. It's good. It's like this film. This film wishes it was anywhere close to 13 Assassins, but still really good. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I liked Wolverine chomping about through that kind of background very much. I thought all the performances in it were great. And I agree, I've always said most superhero movies devolve into CGI things hitting each other, and there's a certain aspect of that in the last act. My main problem with the climax, though, was how do you have a town full of ninjas and the Wolverine and not do some amazing Wolverine versus thousands of ninjas scene?
Yeah. No,
how do you not do that?
Tripods.
On a tripod, right.
But what was weird about that is it seemed so keen to skip past that and get to the big thing at the end.
Which nobody gave a shit about.
Yeah, which you just... Well, the main reaction to that sort of... Because it was so like playing a computer game and reaching a boss.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Which is not necessarily such a bad thing, but my number one reaction to it was, eh?
Yeah, right.
Because I really like the fact that, one of the things that I thought was really good about it, and actually is, in terms of story, is an interesting twist to take, is that, the way it started and the relationship with that guy down the well, and for that to actually turn out that... Because I was so, I talk about it being of the movies, but the of the movies thing to do with that relationship is he's the wronged old man, he dies, and Wolverine avenges him. Whereas actually the way it pans out is a lot more interesting, and something that, while it has been done before, is not nearly so well trodden, and is a lot more an interesting thing to happen. So from that respect, you've got to give the story some kudos.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone... There's two things. I would have loved to have seen a full-blown R-rated and or 18-rated version of the movie where the gutting himself to get the monster out was done in full gruesome visuals. And I would have loved a big ninja scene at the end, because how do you not have Wolverine versus lots of ninjas? But that aside, it's the closest. It's up there. It's certainly in my top 3 of X-Men movies. I mean, everyone went crazy for the First Class, but I have to say I found that fairly mediocre. However, it was really nice, and I think I said this on the previous episode, really nice to revisit the series. It had been a series that I had completely poo-pooed when it first came out as being just things I wasn't interested in particularly, but actually having gone back and just enjoying the characters and enjoying the story, and because I don't put a lot of demands on a comic book film, I really don't. I'm not sat there going, oh, no, they haven't done justice to these tiny little characters I don't give a shit about, or that plot seems a little bit contrived. Well, of course it's contrived. It's a comic book, what's it going to be? I don't really put a lot of demands on it, and therefore, apart from the prequel, The Wolverine Origins, which is just abysmal. Abysmal.
I saw that plane. It was dreadful, yeah.
Apart from that, the series is surprisingly strong. And I really enjoyed going back over them. And I dug the Wolverine. Really dug the Wolverine.
Yeah. Should we do some Woods and Weller then? Because this is the last time we're doing them. I mean, I'm very conscious that we are calling time on Woods and Weller when what I think is going to be a Woodsian, or I hope is going to be a Woodsian tour de force in White House Down is on its way.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen White House Down. It came out in the States, and I have to say, having
I'm going to see it for Jimmy Woods. I'm going to see Jimmy
having
Woods.
Seen Gerard Butler in Olympus Has Fallen, when I saw and already going, well, wait a minute, that's just Die Hard in the White House, but thoroughly enjoyable. To then see the fact that in White House Down, Channing Tatum parades around in a vest, running over broken glass and stuff. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Now that's really Die Hard in the White House. I will check it out on demand. I will not. I haven't gone to see it in the theatres.
Yeah, well, I think it has to be looked at. And by the way, before we start, I really, really, really liked the trailer that you sent me with Gaffet and Everything Is Friendly Guys, whatever it was called.
Fun-loving guys. Yeah, for people who are interested to check it out, you can head over to the Facebook page or the Twitter feed and see that both me and my friend Chris Armstrong, who goes by Snoog on Twitter and who is the host of Wafu FM, having watched Badge of the Assassin, decided, because I put up a still of the best still I could find for the movie was Woods and Yaphet by the basketball court, because it was nicely lit and it was clear and whatever. And it was of them looking happy, because it's about the only moment in the whole movie where they get to look happy. The rest of it is very serious. But my friend Chris said, oh, that looks like this 80s sitcom, Fun-Loving Guys. So we both took it in turns to make 80s sitcom intros to Fun-Loving Guys. So,
and it was also, of course, you sent through a fantastic Peter Weller interview about
Buckaroo
Banzai, which we'll do next. But I think we should do Badge of the Assassin first, because I think it's the one I've got least to say about, and I've just watched it.
Okay.
It's the deadliest game in town.
Don't shoot me, please.
A game of good against evil.
2 good men died right here. Everybody in the world knows those guys are guilty.
A game of black against white.
You take your hands off of my kids, you honky!
A game of killers against cops.
In New York City, killed 2 police officers. If that, he's gonna pay.
I said don't move! Okay, man, okay. Just don't hurt my kids.
And now it's official.
Nobody moves. Just stay where you are.
In this danger zone.
You better get your act together or those animals are gonna walk.
That dude over there shot the cop!
The war is on.
A pig is a pig. You waste them all. I'm not in this to kill, brother.
That's the way it came up.
This is war.
These killers are not getting off.
James Woods.
I've got 2 dead police officers, 2 widows, and some children with busted fathers. To some people in the civilized world, that still means something.
Yaphet Kotto.
What you did doesn't make sense.
It does not have to. It just has to get noticed.
Badge of the Assassin. Rated R. Now on video cassette from Vidmark Entertainment.
What did you make of Badge?
Well, I thought Badge honestly was a missed opportunity. I understand
I could not agree with you more.
I understand it's a TV movie. I do understand. And even taking into account the TV movie tropes, they seem to focus on all the wrong things and not fully explain why the fuck they were focusing on them. Like, just when it went to because about 15 minutes in, if I'm remembering it rightly, they have the first courtroom scene. And I was like, is this going to turn into like a really awesome JFK-style courtroom drama where like things get bandied about and, you know, evidence comes in and gets thrown out and Woods gets to flap around and whatever. And it never did. It never did. Also, the case they had against it, I was like, why is this case difficult to lose? Yeah, just because some guy in a corduroy jacket with a thin beard shouts a lot, somehow that's okay and acceptable in the court. The judge looked asleep.
They're all sat in there. What I loved about it is, you know, the way that there are these court scenes, like you say, there's this whole court case, and the whole thing is, they're having trouble closing the case, they're having trouble bringing them in, you know, we've lost it the first time around. And there's this whole group of people who are the accused, and they are sat and dressed in a way that really reminds me of the scene in Airplane where they're all lined up with clubs and bats and knives and stuff waiting to attack. They've all got that expression on their face.
They all look like Black Panthers, is what they're dressed like.
If they came in dressed like that into an American courtroom and stared at all the witnesses like that, that would be 1,000 years each.
Yeah, no, they were all dressed like Black Panthers, is what they were dressed like. Okay, let's dial it back a bit before we dive into it quickly and just give very, very quickly the plot. Basically, it's set in the early 70s in America. It's about the rise of the race issues and the race battles that had been happening, obviously, at the end of the 60s, early 70s. And it's about the pointless and ruthless slaying of 2 New York policemen in the Bronx by a group that is akin to the Black Panthers, sort of a Black Power group. And you start off with Alex Rocco, who's the most New York man who's ever lived, who's the detective. He's the guy from The Pope Must Die.
I love him.
Yeah. The most New York guy who's ever lived, because he just looks ridiculously Italian-American more than any man. And he's the cop trying to get these guys. Hasn't been able to in 2 years. The district attorney hasn't been able to in 2 years either. And yet, who is this guy coming in as deputy district attorney? It's young upstart Jimmy Woods. And he partners with African-American cop Yaphet Kotto, who's meant to represent, I guess, like the black guy gone straight or whatever, the bureaucratic black guy in power type thing. And they join forces to try and actually bring these guys to trial and eventually prison. And it's sort of the rough scattershot telling of that story. And like you say, there's this whole thing, you know, in movies where at the end of the second act, something falls apart, something doesn't work, something's shit, and then they have to build up to the climax where they're going to right all those wrongs. Well, the end of the second act of this is very clumsily, we didn't win the first case. Because why? Because a guy in a corduroy jacket shouted a lot and the judge fell asleep. That's clearly why. And I forget, what is the reason? Oh, it's a mistrial, it's called, right? Because the jury can't decide either way or some shit. Anyway.
Yeah. But the court procedural stuff just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work at all. No. So then, in order to do the third act, it's all about finding this last bit of evidence to finally close the case and actually win it. The trouble is, it's the finding of the evidence is one of the most tedious things ever. It's a gun buried in a field.
It's like watching. It's about as exciting as watching a gardening program. It's like that.
There's one scene after another where they've got this young guy who's in a jail cell in New Orleans who's suddenly like, I've got an ace in the hole and I'm going to tell you what it is right at the last minute. You're like, I bet that's going to crop up later. Sure enough, it does. When it crops up, though, he then, although this apparently is ace in the hole, apparently it's going to keep him out of prison, right? All of a sudden, he forgets where the gun is buried. They have to. You get a montage of them driving around farmyards, getting out of cars, going, "No, this isn't it." Getting back in cars, driving off again. All the time, it's all the time that the ranger keeps coming up and going, I've got to take this boy away, and Woods keeps going, no, you can't take him away. So there's this whole thing going on. She's utterly tedious as well. When they finally get to the right farm, I was like, oh, thank heavens above. Now we can get on with this fucking movie. The old man who runs the farm went, nope, you're going to have to get a judge down here. And I'm like, oh, Oh, God, now we've got a montage of the judge coming down.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, it really made me think about, is it William Goldman who did Adventures in Screenwriting or whatever?
Yeah.
And it really made me think, like, because at the beginning of the film, there's a big, not exactly like, they have two polar opposite ways of approaching a, like, piece of text at the beginning of the film. Because there's a piece of text at the beginning of Buckaroo Banzai, which if you don't know anything about Buckaroo Banzai and you sit down to watch it, you go, what? That's what it makes you do. But this takes itself very seriously. All the credits are in this, like, really chunky, menacing black and white. There is a brilliant piece of music over the credits at the beginning as well, I thought.
Yeah.
And there's this big long thing about, like, setting the scene and everything's going on. So it takes itself very seriously. And I was kind of thinking, like, wow, this is going to be like a sort of, kind of like a True Believer kind of a thing, but taking itself a bit more seriously and without the mad hair.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah. And also, the thing which it really, really misses the film... Well, no, sorry, just finish that point about the Goldman screenwriting thing. If it is based on true events, which it does say at the beginning, then it does seem to be a case of they have sort of perhaps they've too faithfully tried to recreate the sequence of events that happened or whatever, and gone, well, that's interesting, they couldn't find the farm and everything. When someone like Goldman would have said, no, trust me, that's not interesting. Scrap that bit, work this bit, bring that up, get rid of that. Like, it was really cat-handedly put together. And what was frustrating about that is exactly what you said at the beginning, which is it's a massive missed opportunity in that Jimmy Woods and Yaphet Kotto together is one of the coolest combinations of people I've ever seen in my entire life.
Most
they
definitely.
Have brilliant rapport going on. I can't understand why Yaphet Kotto didn't have, like, a whole stream of films called, like, the Kotto genre or whatever, because he's just brilliant. His voice is just awesome. And, he's being all, like, unbelievably laid back and super cool. And Jimmy Woods is being all, like, climbing the walls and eating the ceiling, kind of, his usual performance. And they barely get any time together. In fact, what really drove me nuts about the film was for the first 50 minutes, it was like, where's Jimmy Woods? Where's Yaphet Kotto? There was this whole 15-minute section at the beginning. I mean, I think it was half an hour before you got, or it felt like half an hour before you actually got in a court.
Yeah, no,
that was very weird.
The problem with it is, I mean, Kotto is in far more movies than you may realise. Like, I would definitely have a look on his IMDb page and dig some of them out because...
I should do, yeah, I should do.
In fact, maybe we should change it to, like, Keaton and Kotto, because that might be a better double case going forward. Because he has done a lot. I mean, he's in some majorly important blaxploitation movies from the 70s.
Okay, I really like that.
And but he's also in a bunch of sort of very different and diverse movies throughout the 80s, so definitely check him out. And obviously Homicide, he's phenomenal in. But the casting is great. What I wanted to point out is it's actually based on the book by the attorney in question. Basically, it was a big court case, and the attorney in question, who Woods plays, the district attorney, wrote this book. And it's obviously like a big, chunky legal tome about not only that period in America, but also, the legal system at the time and New York and blah, 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 blah. And I think what they've done, rather than too faithfully trying to recreate it, I think actually what they've done is they've looked at the screenwriter, who isn't very good, has looked at the 3-act structure and gone, well, this is the structure and I'm just going to stick to it and I'm going to somehow, like, force the book into this structure. And I think, therefore, I don't know how much of it is embellished versus how much of it is real. I really don't know, and I didn't look into it, I'm afraid. But, it makes you feel like he fit the book to the 3-act structure rather than going, no, I really think we need this bit from the book. Because I didn't get that feeling. The sad thing about the Kotto and Woods double act, everything I wanted from this movie, which, could have spurred a lot of debate about the times and about the, any kind of political situation or race situation, which, Kotto and Woods were in perfect position to discuss throughout the movie. There's one particular scene in a hotel room where, like, Kotto is miserable about the food and Woods is ironing his shirt, and they say this kind of
which is a good setup for any scene.
Right, good setup for any scene. Could have had this great discussion. It's almost like the script is afraid to have too much grandstanding, too much discussion, and too much verbal, and keeps trying to manufacture
I'd really agree with that. Yeah.
visual action where there isn't any. You know, there's this big car chase at the beginning which is utterly irrelevant. There's like I say, the long period of time that they're trying to find the bloody gun that's utterly tedious, and it seems to keep trying to force into the narrative this action, whereas, you know, if you look at something like JFK, and I understand that was made later, but it's always my benchmark for this kind of thing. That is a movie in which there aren't car chases or gunfights or lots of shouting or anything like that. It's just discussion after discussion after discussion about interesting things with interesting characters. And yeah, you can argue it's historical, you know, accuracy and blah, 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 but that's not really the point of the movie. The thing that Badger the Assassin lacks, that something like True Believer did have, was this discussion about what it all means. You know, and you had everyone well represented. You know, you had the police represented, you had the district attorney represented, you had the Black Power movement represented, you had, you know, the African American who's got out of the ghetto and is now working, you know, in a position of power. You had that represented. And, you know, there's some nice things, like Yaphet Kotto goes down to talk with one of the criminals before he's convicted, like trying to talk some sense to him, kind of thing. But it never builds to the intellectual climax it needs to. And that's its main failing. And that's what's sad about it, because I was a hotel scene, and then they have two words to each other, and Koto's out of the door. And I'm like... It's a screenplay problem, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and
it's got great casting. I mean, the direction is, you know, pretty pedestrian, and you know, the print I watched was pretty, you know, pretty scratchy and tired. But
well, it's only ever been released on VHS. There's never been a cleaned up print.
Full of, you know, it's full of 70s cars and, you know, lots of sort of 70s, 80s fashion and stuff, and that's all good. And that wouldn't matter if the screenplay was, well, just good, because it was just a poor effort at screenplay, and it was a shame because there were a couple of good bits in it. There was Yaphet. Oh yeah, was that Pam Grier in there as well?
Yeah, Pam Grier is the woman with they've given her funny teeth in the movie. She's got one tooth crossing another one, or she's meant to have a gold tooth or something. But she's one of the she's one of the women who's in this like Black Liberation Army. Yeah. She's one of the women who, she doesn't witness it, but she's there when the guys get back having killed the cops. Yeah. And, so she gives...
But it's got some nice, you know, there's occasionally a nice little thing comes out of it where, like, for instance, there was a bit where they want to go in this house to get this suspect, and they're not sure if the suspect is in there or not. And they're about to sort of go in with all guns blazing, and Yaphet goes, no, wait a minute. And he goes over to the car, and he does something, and then he wanders back, and they're like, what was all that about, you know? And it's a really nice little trick he plays in order to lure out the man of the house. And he says, it's sociology, don't you know anything about sociology? And I thought that was a really nice little moment. And who knows, perhaps that's a true moment. I would say it probably was a true moment, because it has this ring to it of like, oh, that's something interesting. You know, just like you're talking about, it's an interesting, engaging little moment. But these are islands of interest among, like, it's quite dull sea of sludge, which just... And like I was going to say, first of all, the courtroom scenes in that film are the most abysmally marshalled bits of film I've ever seen in my life. Like,
the set looks...
is so bad because... The guy you're talking about, the shouty defendant lawyer of like the most convictable crew in his entire, every single scene he does is a prolonged form of leading the witness, isn't it? All he does is,
of course.
And is it true that you did this, and then he said that, and then this other thing happened, and then that caused you to do this, and they did the other, and they go, yeah. Like at any point there, in any other courtroom drama, and I don't know anything about law other than what I've learned from TV, but I know at that point, you know, a lawyer such as James Spader even would put his hand up and go, leading the witness.
Well, leading the witness and badgering the witness. I mean,
if he's not badgering, he's leading. If he's not leading, he's badgering.
And the most you get the most you get is this laughable bit where Woods is like, can he step away from the witness, please?
Yeah, but
and
even that gets me on to my second point, which is every single courtroom scene, everyone in those scenes looks half asleep. I mean, properly looks like they've all just had a really big lunch and now they're all in need of a nap. And Jimmy Woods is like in his chair like this. And the judge is so low down in his chair that his chin is resting on the desk because he's so sort of sleepy and just wants to fall asleep. And there's no energy to it. And I'm sorry, I don't care who was in charge of the shoot that day. Someone should have stopped and said, guys, can we just try that one more time with, just, a smidge of commitment?
Yeah. But no, it's really odd. The set also looks like it's meant to be the New York City courthouse, and they walk up like the grand steps with the pillars and everything, and the set literally looks like a Python set almost, from like a courtroom from a Monty Python set.
Someone's like erected like a jury box in a scout hut. That's, it really, really does look like that.
It does. It looks like
it would have its own charm if they were all just blazing away and Woods was leaping on the judge and biting him and if it had like a bit of energy to it. But
not only that, but the key to courtroom dramas is that you are invested in what is going on and you are invested in the plot and you understand what they're trying to argue, so that when, the opposition pulls out some, last-minute Hail Mary plea or whatever, you can be like, oh, my God, no, but we've got to, what are we doing? And I think the movie thinks it has that with the whole hung jury and then they've got to go find the gun thing, and then we're meant to be invested in the fact that the gun is really the key to the whole thing. But I'm like, are you telling me that a gun buried in a farm for 2 years in New Orleans, 1,000 miles away from the crime scene, is going to have any evidence bearing? Seriously, even in days before like DNA, I'd just be like, no, I'm throwing that out. Why? Because it's been in a field for 2 years in New Orleans and it clearly has no. And then they're like, then there's something about fingerprints on the hood of a car, and then, but you just put that in there. And I'm like, what does any of this mean? Did he put it in there? Did he not put it in there? Did we see a scene where he put it in there?
I mean, that's the most startling thing about it then, for me, flat out, is that this was apparently based on a book by a lawyer and had absolutely no relation to the norm of the law.
Not only that, but the attorney, whose name was...
I love the way Woods is actually called, like, Beetlebaum or something.
No. He's wait a minute. Tannenbaum. It's Robert K. Tannenbaum. The attorney in question was Robert K. Tannenbaum. And like you said, there's absolutely no legal stuff in the movie whatsoever. Very, very odd. And I just don't understand. Oh, he was also the co-executive producer on the movie. So why didn't he step in and go, no, this corduroy man would never watch?
I think co-executive producer means that he's sat in his Manhattan penthouse occasionally getting a call, to say, it's all still going.
Yeah, I mean, also apparently it's like woefully inept when it comes to actually representing the time correctly. For example, apparently the car that he sat on at the beginning wouldn't have been made until like 4 or 5 years after the...
all over the place. It was all over the place because it had a real, I really, really thought, wow, it looks an awful lot like 1984 more than 1974 in terms of what people were wearing.
Yes.
I thought it
completely
looked very 80s indeed.
I mean,
they'd gone to great lengths to stick like big afro wigs on some people and give Woods a flared suit, but that didn't change the fact that everyone in the background had been like herded off the street to be extras, and they were all just dressed in 80s clothes.
There was also a scene where Woods returns to the crime scene where Yaphet finds him, and it appears to be wearing a big wig underneath a hat, like he's in disguise or something.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, I can understand that on the basis of, so even the hardened black New York cop is afraid to go into the Bronx. But why wasn't that discussed?
Yeah.
Like, why wasn't that something to talk about? Like, I'm a big fan of blaxploitation movies. I love all the people. I love, obviously, I love Yaphet Kotto. I'm a big Pam Grier fan. big Fred Williamson fan on all those movies, Jim Brown and stuff, and I love all that stuff. And it's funny, there are B-movie, grindhouse, shonky, shot for a dollar, blaxploitation gangster movies that have more to say about being an African American in New York in the early 70s than this supposedly true story had to say. And and that's odd. I just found that because I was all about get some good soundtrack, get Yaphet, let's have a good discussion, let's have some good, but it really wasn't.
Yeah, but even if it had gone complete True Believer and been, or even what's the one with Weller as a super cop attorney kind of a movie? What was that? On the motorbike with the guy with the beard with Sam.
Oh, no, that's Weller. That was Shakedown or whatever
Blue Jean Cop.
Blue Jean Cop. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it had gone off in a mad Blue Jean Cop direction where they just ran around the place killing people with no relation to the law, that would have been fine. Because for me, I just wanted. I was just delighted by Woods and Koto together. I just thought that is such a good combination, and it's being completely wasted. And the other thing about it is, I think you're absolutely right to say that the defining word for the entire experience is odd, because I still think that you or I could have been working in whatever TV station this went on and been told, listen, this thing's a bit of a mess. Can you do a bit of an editing job on it and see what you can salvage? I still think there would be a better movie in there, salvaged from what they filmed. I still think there'd be a tighter, better movie. There's an awful lot of shit in there.
Yeah, no, definitely based on what they filmed. And I think that the biggest shame for me is that I thought the performances were really good across the board. I loved how Woods didn't start off like he does in True Believer. He didn't start off a shouty, ranty, insane, I'm going to bust the doors of the courthouse down, I'm putting the law on trial type person. He kind of slowly built over the movie to that. And it was interesting to see Woods clearly trying to inject some energy into the New Orleans scenes, him shouting at the ranger who keeps trying to take away his witness, because there really wasn't anything else going on in those scenes, so Woods was ramping it up. But to be honest, I thought his performance was, for Woods, actually one of the best we've seen of the Woods. I thought it was a very nicely nuanced, varied performance, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I liked it, yeah.
I thought Koto was all the kinds of cool that you want him to be, and even day players like Alex Rocco and stuff, who are normally, fairly hammy, was decent, was really decent in the film. I thought that the location shooting was nice, although, like you say, it looked 80s rather than 70s. And I thought that considering it's a TV movie, it was put together okay. But I thought that the script had some major issues, and I would have liked to have seen a much more... we said that it took itself seriously, but it was almost insane how badly it didn't take itself seriously enough in terms of what is this film actually about. It strikes me as it's not enough to say there was a time that black people used to shoot policemen. Let's do a movie about that. There needs to be more about it. It's very interesting. I was just reading
because there was no talk about who, because I bet the book was absolutely packed with fascinating stuff about the origins of this Black Liberation Army and what they were about and why there was this feeling that there had to be an insurrection and stuff. They would talk. There was the occasional sort of tossed in line about the brothers got to stick together kind of a thing, but there was no background to anything they were doing. It was just they're bad people and we've got to get them. And obviously what they did was a horrendous thing, but at least give someone a paragraph of dialogue, even Woods, if you like, just to say, oh, by the way, this is kind of where they're coming from, this is what we're dealing with, which they never really did.
No, not really. And it was very interesting when the film premiered. Apparently there was, when they had the press conference for the movie, I was just reading on Wikipedia, and it's interesting that it says that a TV critic who was too young to remember the horrifying and bizarre era, but apparently there was a little bit of controversy at the press conference about the movie being racist and not really explaining the Black Liberation Army's side of events, and kind of making the district attorney, the New York Police Department, be too shiny and good, and there wasn't enough kind of grey area and discussion in it. And it's interesting because while I wouldn't say it was racist, because it's just telling a true story, that did happen, and obviously it dispels any myth of being racist by having Yaphet Kotto's character in there, and could have done with similar characters such as him. It is, however, incredibly shallow in terms of dealing with the issues of the day, and it would have been a more interesting film had it done so, I think.
Yeah. So it's not exactly a ringing endorsement for it, but if you are stuck for an hour and a half where you're sort of interested to see, it's some of the least energetic scenes I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, school plays wipe the floor in terms of energy, at least.
Yeah.
With
less energetic than even a coughing and wheezing, overweight Raymond Burr in the last seasons of Perry Mason, where he's like...
it's literally like they've all been slipped a roof.
Then there was a whole bit where one of the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, gets up and starts questioning a witness. And it was only then explained that apparently he's running his own trial. But I was like, that was never explained. So all of a sudden he just gets up. And I was like, this is ludicrous. They wouldn't stand for this for an instant.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't be... because I watch a lot. The wife and I love The Good Wife that's on at the moment, the Juliana Margulies political, legal drama that's on. And yes, it's incredibly hammed up or whatever, but it's a fairly decent legal political drama. And before that, we were big fans of Boston Legal because we liked the Spader and the Shatner. And from those TV shows, I know enough about televisual law, if not actual law, to know that none of their posturing and dancing about would have been allowed for a second. In those shows, someone only has to cough at a place. They're like, objection. So...
Anyway, so that's that. I think we should now move on to Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah, we definitely should. And at this point, I wanted to quickly jump to the Facebook page where I had asked people to comment and see. So I just wanted to read some of those out very quickly, see what you thought.
Okay.
Commenting on the internet, they're commenting all over the internet and not all over my face.
Kyle Poling from the Bloodbaths and Boomsticks podcast, he says, I defy you to name anything that is better than Buckaroo Banzai. Whatever you say, you are wrong. Hey, isn't that a watermelon over there? Robert Long, our friend from Baltimore, points out that Yaphet Kotto was, of course, in a homicide scene with Don Dola favourite George Stover from Baltimore. A lot of the guys who I like at the Baltimore indie film scene, George Stover, Anne Frith, people like that, appeared in episodes of Homicide while they were filming in Baltimore. So George Stover and Yaphet have met. I'd like to know about that. My friend Matt Payne said James Wood's Videodrome mind-blowing. We've covered that, obviously, previously on the show. Well, let me just scroll down. Carlin Trammell from the Nerd Lunch podcast says, are you going to talk about the absolutely insane DVD commentary track that is done by the writer of the movie, this is Buckaroo Banzai, pretending to be the real Reno, Nevada, talking about how the docudrama differs from real life? Actually, I didn't watch the commentary, but what I did watch, there was a clip I put up on Facebook of what looks like an amalgam of DVD extras that were cobbled together and put on YouTube, where the director of the film, W.D. Richter, talks about the film as if it was a docudrama, as if Dr. Banzai actually exists. So, and we'll get more into this later on when we talk about the movie. But no, so while I didn't listen to the commentary, I am aware of that. Were you aware of the sort of origin of it?
I'd be interested.
Yeah, no, well, it's basically to do with these two guys who both at certain points went through the college in Dartmouth College in the States, and one who was a screenwriter, Earl Mac Rauch, and one who's turned out to be a screenwriter and a director, W.D. Richter, and how they would, when Richter invited Rauch on the advice of his wife, actually, to having read one of Rauch's books, early novels, his wife said, "Oh, you should get together with this guy," invited him out to L.A., and eventually did take him up on the offer years later, and they would spend hours whiling away the time, both writing to and from, but also when they got to LA, about this character Buckaroo Banzai, which is why the movie starts as if there's already a world that is created. Because there's basically a whole mythology, both prior to the movie and after the movie, that was going to be explored in other movies, in novels, in comic books, in various other forms that never really came to be. But the character is one that has been discussed by the screenwriter and the director for years and years, predating the film. So I think that's where the whole idea of this character really exists, and let's play it off like a docudrama comes from. Okay, so Jason Beckman asks, how did you think the proposed sequel to Banzai would have played out? To be honest, I don't really have any thoughts on this. What did you think, man?
I think a sequel would have been terrific because, yeah, I mean, who's going to lose out of that? The good thing about coming to the film was that I didn't know anything about it. Didn't know who was in it. I didn't know. I can honestly say I knew nothing about it. I certainly didn't know that it was its sort of own cult thing. And watching it, I can completely understand why. And what's pleasing about it is you can understand why, because it's one of these things that's got a following, because it's so wildly different. I mean, you cannot say fairer than that about this film. It is wildly different to most films. I mean, it falls into that category that there was a few 80s movies out there, but stuff like Howard the Duck, Earth Girls Are Easy, even something like Time Bandits or whatever, it falls into that. Beetlejuice, only in the 80s would a movie like this get made by a major studio. Because you sent me there's a fantastic Q&A on YouTube with Weller and Lithgow talking about the film after they just watched the screening, and they have a Q&A session. And when I was watching, I was thinking, what I'd like to ask, if I'd have been there, I wish I could have been there to ask, do you think that this was a unique period in time for a film like this to get made, or is that unfair? Am I being unfair? Are there actually, really interesting mad films getting made, and I've just got to go out there and find them? Because I would have been interested to hear what they would have said about that. I think probably it'd be fair enough. I think Weller would have vociferously wanged on about how there'll never be anything like this again, because he gets so passionate about films when he talks about them. Yeah, but I mean, you look at any of the second one. I think a second one would have, it so doesn't box itself into any corners because it's so completely, free of any kind of, structural limitation. Right. It's just flying off in all directions at all times, and there would have been no problem with them putting together a second one. I'm sure of it, and probably the best sign for a second one is that it seems like they genuinely all had a really good time doing it. Because in that Q&A they say, I just spent the whole time laughing, and Lithgow says that he genuinely thought, for a long time, they were making something really special, and that this was going to completely blow people away. Yeah. So when you have that kind of, and they both talk of a really sort of burning enthusiasm on the part of Richter and the other chap, Rauch. And Rauch, like a real burning enthusiasm, and they put that message on the end because they loved the film. And I think when you have that many people involved who really love something, and are so enthusiastic about going on to make the second one, for God's sake, let them do it. Yeah. The sequel was going to be, I believe, about the arch enemy Hanoi Zan, who's apparently referenced in the first film, and all those scenes have been cut. They have, they've all been cut out. And it was meant to be, he's like the head of the World Crime League and the Death Squad or something or other, and there was going to be yet another kind of fight about that. That would have been fine. I would have happily seen that. That would have been great. It's I think, like Kevin Smith said in the Q&A, it does just drop you into the world, and it doesn't ask you. Yeah, it doesn't tell you anything or spoon feed you anything. You've just got to kind of catch up and get into it. And it's,
I love those kind of films. I have no problem with those kind of films. And like I say, I think it's got, in its shooting style and in its fantasy elements and all the rest of it, it's got that 80s, like I said, Howard the Duck is a good example of like yet another bonkers fucking, there's no explanation. Here we go, there's a duck world and the duck lands on the planet Earth and away we go. Like there's no like big real like thing. It's just take it for granted and this is what's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's very much what this is. And I liked it in much the same way. This is certainly cleverer. It certainly has a more unique sense of humour and a sort of weird, surreal sense of humour, which is either intentional or comes from the fact that the two creators behind the film have this knowledge of the world they're creating that is unique to those two people, and they cannot discuss it with anyone else to the same extent. It would be like if you and I, having known each other as long as we've known each other, wanted to come up with something with a bunch of like in-jokes in it or weird flights of fancy. We could never fully explain why we were doing certain things. It would just, we would know why and they wouldn't. So, that's where the movie comes from. And I echo your sentiments. I would have loved to have seen a sequel, definitely. Lewis Cogill wrote, Buckaroo Banzai was a confusing mess of thinking it was bigger and better than it was, and a cast more famous than the roles they played. It was like the film itself thought it was too good to even be a film. I didn't hate it, but I would never watch it again. I'm not quite sure what that means, but...
Well, I think it's fair to say that I would completely understand why someone might say it doesn't know what it is, because it is very difficult to nail it down exactly what it is. It is also a mess, and a glorious mess, but it is a mess. There's no, I don't think I don't think it can be defended as not a mess. Put it that way. It's very all over the place, and I would be lying if I said that there weren't certain scenes that completely lost me, and I sort of tuned out for a bit. But then the genius of it is that it keeps on leaping off into some crazy other like little set piece, which I'd find a real delight.
Right?
And it's not. I don't think. I'm not sure that anyone who would. I mean, well, there will be someone, but I think that most people, if they actually had a sensible conversation about it, would probably say, no, it's not a perfect... no one would claim it was a perfect film. There are certain bits that definitely lose me. But what I liked about it and what salvaged it for me was the very fact of its messiness, because it kept on leaping off and doing something bonkers and completely unexpected and completely mad, and sometimes it misfired and sometimes it worked. It was, in some respects, it was almost like a sketch show in that way.
Yeah. One of the key elements is when he's chasing after the... And we'll get round to explaining the plot in a minute, but when he is chasing the aliens who are driving in the truck, or in the van rather, and he's on the motorbike, you see him get clipped by the van and he drives off into a ravine. And then it cuts to these like two hunters in the woods, and there's this like little scene with these two hunters in the woods, which is utterly charming, but has nothing to do, other than they find like another alien rock and blah, 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 blah. In any other movie, that scene wouldn't be in there as long as it's in there. It might be that two hunters stumble across the alien rock and maybe die, but it wouldn't be this drawn out little, like you say, almost comedy skit of a bit. But it's really nice. So,
and I think that also boils down to the previous question about the sequel. Is, of course, you could make a sequel to it, and of course, it's worth doing, because it could never suffer from the other sequels things doing of being like tied down by the first, or retreading elements of the first, or reintroducing characters, because it doesn't do any of that stuff in the first one anyway.
Right? No, completely.
So you can just completely, start afresh almost with Buckaroo.
The next question we got was from Axel K from the Profondo Cinema podcast. He writes, what would you think about a new film where Buckaroo's crew teams up with the survivors from House 2? I think what he's trying to do there, because House and House 2 are particularly insane in terms of films, as well as House. House is another good example. The House movies is another good example. On the tin, it looks like one thing, and when you watch them, you're like, what on earth is going on in these films? And so, yeah, that would possibly... Axel, you've possibly written the blueprint there for the most insane movie ever made. And I think the only decade big enough and strong enough to hold that movie was the 80s.
Well, of course.
That just wouldn't happen
because Sir Henry at Rawlinson End is an 80s film as well, isn't it? I mean, that's a British example. I mean, Sir Henry at Rawlinson End is completely fucked. I mean, there is no sense to any of that movie. And in the 80s, it got written, in the 60s and 70s. It got made in the 80s.
Yeah, no, definitely, that does happen. And so, I mean, the 80s were a decade where you could just say, seemingly, here is this fucking bonkers idea. Can I do it? And it might be because, I hate to give it any credit, but it might be something like Star Wars, which was a total left field suggestion in terms of, because nothing like that had really been explored or made before. It certainly is, as the 80s kicks into it. It might have just been, look, off the success of that, the studios were like, okay, what other big budget, sci-fi, gang of quirky characters against the aliens type movies can we throw into production? I don't know.
But it's funny because, the other question I would have asked at the Q&A would have been, can you talk me through how this film got made? Because, I mean, there is the Star Wars. I mean, I'd be really interested to hear them explain how it is, like the director and the screenwriter just slowly talk me through how it was that they got funding for the film. Because even in the 80s, even after Star Wars and all of that, it really suggests that they got money from people who didn't read the script. Do you know what I mean? Because if you sat down and read that script, both Weller and Lithgow, who were both, let's face it, being asked to play the leads, both their response to the script was, Weller said he couldn't finish it, he put it down because he didn't really get what it was, and told them, I don't get it, man, I don't get it. and Lithgow said the same thing. He was just like, I don't understand what this is. And that's so I'd be fascinated to know how it got made, and presumably, it would be the same with the House movies, although I'm not really familiar with them.
I mean, interesting to know that after this, Richter goes on to make Big Trouble in Little China, which is another prime example. Of course, this alongside...
Richter wrote Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, the 70s version.
One. And he also wrote Stealth.
Yeah, which is appalling. But I can only imagine, because he hadn't done anything in 10 years, that was just a way to kind of, grab some cash. But
off bailiffs.
Yeah, but... No, I mean, Big Trouble in Little China, Howard the Duck, and this are prime examples of movies where, at the time, they bombed. They were very ambitious at the time for all the people who were making them. They utterly bombed, and years later have gained cult success, notoriety, and popularity. And it's interesting that obviously Richter had his hand in Big Trouble in Little China, because that's another... that's another weird fucking movie. I mean, on the surface, yes, it's about this fantasy thing of, like, the Kurt Russell character going to the Chinese underworld and, battling a bunch of fun fantasy things. But there's also some scenes in there where you're like, what is going on? and Banzai has that in spades. A couple more things from the Facebook page quickly. Mark Burns writes, you missed the Quitters Inc. segment from Cat's Eye that stars Woods. I've not come across that at all. Have you heard of Quitters Inc.?
Is Cat's Eye, is that not the Stephen King movie where it's a load of short stories filmed together?
Maybe, I don't know.
Oh, yes, it is. Quitters Inc. is I think Quitters Inc. is the story about, it's a guy giving up smoking.
Oh, okay.
And it's like a grisly, macabre story about, I think I won't say it because it could spoil it, but that is the movie with that scared the shit out of me when I was little. I was very little, and I crept downstairs. I was about 5 or something, and I crept downstairs, and the babysitter was watching that film, and it was there's a section of it with a troll that steals the breath out of sleeping children, and it scared the life out of me. It really freaked me out, that film.
So it's one to maybe check out. He goes on to say, here's a question. I have neither seen or own Buckaroo Banzai or Screamers. Do I need them in my collection? And, oh, by the way, I watched You're Next yesterday. I loved it. Tits, gore, slapstick, and the delightful Barbara Crampton. Well, You're Next is a horror movie that I would urge everyone go out to see because I did really enjoy it. And on the subject of Buckaroo Banzai and Screamers, I've said to him, yes, you probably need to own them. Screamers, definitely.
Screamers, you need like 3 copies of. and Buckaroo Banzai. Screamers, no doubt. Screamers.
Yeah. And Buckaroo, yes. I mean, I think if you are into cult film in any way, this is one you have to have seen.
Screamers is a proper Peter Weller tour de force. It's all about him like chewing up this part. It's brilliant.
And Jason Jermicow writes, anything planned in the future featuring our Messiah of Smarm, James Spader?
Well, Spader's always good, but he's a sleaze. Is that you? Because you were telling me the other day that he's been cast as whatever.
He's been cast as what's the name of the character now? Ultron in the new Avengers.
Is Ultron sleazy?
Yeah, right.
Having said, because he's unbelievable. I mean, he looks like he's sort of leaking oil out of every pore. And he's like, especially in Crash. He's just. I wanted to slap him in Crash because all he has on his face the whole time is this sort of leering mush.
Yeah, slap him, or I don't know, put some kitchen towel on him to absorb the sleaze.
Don't get me wrong. I love Spader. I don't know why, but I do love him.
We could maybe do some rare Spader down the road. Our next thing was going to be Keaton and Kilmer.
I like Keaton and Koto now.
Okay, so we might do Keaton and Koto. We might do some Yaphet Kotto
I've
movies.
I've never really been a Kilmer fan, whereas I love Yaphet Kotto.
And Michael Keaton. So that makes more sense to me. I'd like that. Although they've never starred in a film together, have they?
As far as we know.
As far as we know. That's what we are. Now, Woods and Weller, having done a bit more research, they did star in an HBO film, different segments of it, called Men and Women, Stories of Seduction. And it's the only title on IMDb that they've starred in together. And it was an HBO film in the 90s. And it is available on DVD. So who knows? Yeah. It may be the reason that we get back together and do another one of these films. Just looking on the webpage, I don't think we got any other... I mean, Philip O'Neill, our friend from Sweden, asked, I've often wondered what happened to Yaphet Kotto. But I think he's still about doing stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I was just saying, because it's interesting that you're saying that he's got this whole... I'm sure he's got this whole filmography out there, and I don't know any of it. All I know of Yaphet is very limited, Live and Let Die and Homicide and this, really. I mean, that's... And, a few other bits and pieces. So I'd be quite interested to explore his work, because I think he's a tremendous character.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing he did was a movie called Witless Protection, which was a horrible, horrible film with Larry the Cable Guy in it, where he crops up in a cameo. And I presume, I haven't seen it, I'm just reading what I'm reading on IMDb. I presume he's only in that because he hadn't done anything since 2001. And again, he possibly needed a little bit of cash. But no, I mean, the last big thing he really did was Homicide and the TV movie that resulted from it.
He's incredible in Alien as well.
Yeah, well, he's in Alien and Running Man. They're the other two big titles. If you're not into the blaxploitation stuff, that's the other two big titles. But no, he's active all through the 90s. There's plenty of stuff in the 90s you could watch with him in it. Plenty of stuff in the 80s with him in it. Loads of stuff. So yeah, and obviously he starts back in the 70s. So yeah, I mean, 70s, 80s, 90s, he's got a pretty solid career. Even 60s, actually. Plenty of, he's in the original Thomas Crown Affair.
So the lesson is, go out there and get some Koto.
Yeah, so while he might not be actively working right now, and while there is a guy on Facebook claiming to be Yaphet Kotto who only goes on and on about being abducted by aliens, which could be the real Yaphet Kotto, could not be, I don't know. That is what's going on with him.
Evil! Pure and simple from the 8th dimension!
I'm not ready for this.
So what? Big deal.
Salutations, great Buckaroo Banzai. A common great danger confronts both our worlds.
These are Martian names. John Webb, John Fat-Eating, John Icicle Boy. Martians in New Jersey.
Buckaroo, President's on line 1, calling about is everything okay with the alien spacecraft from Planet 10, or should he just go ahead and destroy Russia?
Tell him yes on 1 and no on 2.
Which was yes, destroy Russia or number 2?
not worth it, Buckaroo. Forget about me. They'll never break me.
Honey, get off the phone.
We're giving you a chance to save your planet.
I want my missing circuit now!
End of discussion.
But now let's go. Why don't you explain, or attempt to explain, as broadly as we can, the plot of Buckaroo Banzai, and then we will delve into that briefly.
Well, the plot is, like I say, when you sit down to watch it, like Bad to the Assassin, it opens with this rolling text that introduces you by saying, Buckaroo Banzai, the world-famous neurologist, like time traveler, guitarist, wizard, or whatever. Like, he just lists all these things that he's like a...
He's a brain surgeon. He's a rock musician. He's a...
Got it written down, I think. It's a brilliant neurosurgeon, and he's got a group called the Hong Kong Cavaliers, and he's about to test his new jet car. Right, and this is the introduction you get, and you go, right.
Well, he's about to test his new jet car, but...
And he's late. He's late to turn up for the jet car test, because... Why is he late again?
He's doing brain surgery with Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum.
There is this amazing scene, because you're not fully aware necessarily at this point in the movie who the Hong Kong Cavaliers are. They turn out to be a band, each of which have their own sort of unique talent. One's really good at building stuff, another guy's really scientific, and so on. But you see him, and he's talking to Goldblum about maybe joining the group. Meaning, like, this group of people he works with, because he's, you're a really good brain surgeon, you should join the group. And then he says, do you sing? And Goldblum goes, yeah, I sing. I can dance, like that. There's, like, a really good time where, like, Goldblum's like, I can dance. And you're just like, what? Yeah. And then it goes into the testing of the car.
Yeah. And basically, while he's testing his car, the idea of this car apparently is that you can drive through things in the car. Why you'd want to do that? Why you'd want to pump billions of dollars into driving through things, I don't know. But they
would drive into other dimensions.
Well, yeah. And part of driving through this mountain is he drives through the mountain by driving into the 8th dimension, which it turns out is a bizarre mix of what seems to be like electron microscope imagery coupled with sort of spinning people, and it's a scary place, the 8th dimension. There's no doubt about it. But Weller doesn't seem fazed.
Well, they look like adult fetuses. They're kind of covered in goo. They're naked. They're floating in midair, and they kind of thwap the front of the car as he drives through.
he's running them over in this other dimension or whatever. Weller doesn't even, emit a small howl of worry. He just drives through. Comes out the other end of this mountain and goes, successful test, who's worried? But then he gets down and notices that there's a sort of sludgy ball stuck to the bottom of his car. And basically, there's an awful lot of stuff going on. I mean, he also then goes off and plays with the Hong Kong Cavaliers, and Ellen Barkin is crying, and he sings a song to Ellen Barkin. All this stuff is going on. There's all this different mad stuff going on.
Ellen Barkin is the twin sister of his dead wife, who was killed by Hanoi Zhan in the past.
Right. And there's all this stuff with, people. A lot of these bands are sort of vaguely introduced, but not really introduced. And anyway, it turns out that basically there are some creatures from a place called Planet 10. Is that right?
Well, in the scrolling text at the beginning, after all the introduction to Buckaroo Banzai, it says as the last sentence, and all of this is being watched by some aliens floating above New Jersey or something.
Yeah. And there's this spaceship, which I really like this spaceship. It looks like a sort of bit of coral or something, like a flying piece of coral.
They were all based on underwater creatures, yeah, all the alien spaceships, yeah.
And they're sort of watching it. And the brilliant thing is that the aliens are Christopher Lloyd and those two other brilliant actors who are...
Vincent, is it Schiavelli and Dan Hedger?
Yeah, and they're a little double act. What's amazing about it, this film has Christopher Lloyd in it.
So Vincent Schiavelli and Dan Hedger, yeah.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is Christopher Lloyd is in it and spends the entire time with this sort of red lobster mask on his head. And, like, the entire time, you know, he's so rarely Christopher Lloyd in this film. And, yeah, and basically it's a, like, quest of Buckaroo Banzai to sort of... What is it? Is it an invasion? Is it... I don't know what it is. What is it?
They need something... Don't the aliens need something to get home or something like that?
Like
and it's this little contraption that makes his speedy car goes through the 8th dimension, and they're constantly trying to get that the whole time, and they say if they don't get that and they don't get home, then they are going to drop a bomb on Smolensk and start the Third World War, because this is obviously at the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
So there's this whole... And the aliens sort of, you know, because they're referenced as like the red... It's not red sentinels, but red something or other, red something. They're almost a metaphor for the Russians. Not quite, but almost.
Yeah.
But then there's also this subplot that John Lithgow's character, Emilio Lizardo, who is an Italian human who was working with Buckaroo's father back in the day on similar dimension-leaping tests.
Yeah, 1938.
Yeah, tests.
Which is very specific about, and you go, does that have any resonance? No, not really. It's just...
It does have resonance, because isn't it the same year as the War of the Worlds broadcast?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it has that thing going on.
Yeah, because there's a whole subplot also about the War of the Worlds broadcast is actually real, but then they hypnotised Orson Welles to say that it was fake afterwards.
Yeah.
It's a nice little touch. And in fact, they do try and land in the town in New Jersey that Orson Welles substituted for Reading in his War of the Worlds radio shows. But then also John Lithgow has like this ability to like contact the aliens or something because of this test that they did back in 1938 or something like that.
I mean, the first time you meet John Lithgow, he's attaching electrodes to his tongue and like frying himself. And that seems to transport him in his mind back to the 1938 experiment where he gets stuck like some kind of like fat cat in a cat flap, like halfway in our dimension, half in the nth dimension. And then he comes out with mad hair, and he's now this Dr. Lizardo liquid beast or whatever.
Lord John Warfin is his alien name.
And then, you know, and it literally does this. It goes from Weller finishes driving through the mountain, cuts to Lithgow electrocuting his tongue and flying back to 1938 and becoming Dr. John Warfin. Then it cuts to Weller arriving to do a gig with the Hong Kong Cavaliers, where he then proceeds to like play the bugle for like as part of this rock and roll band, then stops everything because Ellen Barkin is crying, and then he stops that and sits down and starts singing a piano tune to Ellen Barkin,
which is the best, my money, the best scene in the whole movie.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Yeah.
Excuse me, is someone out there not having a good time? Somebody crying out there in the darkness? Somebody crying.
I'm sorry.
Can we get her a mic and a spotlight? Tommy, can we run her a mic? Get Blaze to run her a mic?
Are you serious?
Yeah, run her a mic. What's your name?
Who cares?
Right. Well, I care. What's your name?
Right.
Penny.
Did you say Peggy?
No, my name's Penny. Penny Pretty. It doesn't matter. It's not important. I just sponged up a little too much Bat 69. That's all. I'm down to my last nickel in this lousy town. They wouldn't even take my luggage and hop. I lost my room in the Y this morning. It's cool.
Hey, no. Don't be mean. have to be mean. Because, remember, no matter where you go, there you are. I'm gonna sing this song for you, Peggy.
No, Penny.
And anybody else out there who will waste it.
This is weird.
I was very disappointed that there was no more music in the rest of the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, well, apart from the end where they're all marching along
Right.
it's that like really 80s like it's almost like John Carpenter like music.
But do you want to... Okay, there's two bits of trivia. First of all, that I can mention. First of all, there were two cinematographers. The reason why the scenes at the beginning, certainly that scene in the nightclub, looks so amazing. Because it was W.D. Richter's first or second movie. He's only directed a couple of films. So it probably wasn't down to him. But the reason why it looks so good is that they had an original cinematographer, whose name I'm going to find quickly. The original cinematographer was Jordan Cronenweth, and he does all the scenes that look really, really good. And then you get Fred Kernenkamp, who does the rest of the movie, and he was replaced by a producer who wanted it to look more, as John Lithgow said, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, to be honest, my personal taste was towards the original cinematographer. I thought the movie, the first 30 minutes of the movie, looked amazing. I think as it gets into the more sort of action sequency, choppy, uppy climax, plow towards the climax, I think it looks less good. But I think that the opening and the development of the movie looks terrific.
Yeah, I mean, for me, coming to it at 33. It is to me. It's a fun curio, and I'll never have the kind of love for it that some people definitely do. But I think that's because, like Kevin Smith talked about, watching it in class and things. And I think there's every chance that if this had been something we'd have got out from Star Video, on a whim when we were 14 years old, we would have been quoting it at each other all the time and absolutely loving it anyway, because it very much tapped into our sense of humour then, definitely. And I think we would have loved it at that age, and we would have quoted away at it, and we would have had our VHSs, and it would have been, a key element of our upbringing. It really would not surprise me if that was the case. But it's it's really, really good fun, and there's some really nice lines in it. Like, I really like it when, like, its sense of humour is very, very strange, and sometimes it doesn't work for me. Like when one of the band members says, like, "Oh, this is weird" or whatever, when he goes down and sits and plays the piano, I thought, nah, that doesn't really work. But I laughed out loud when Weller was suddenly called away to the phone and someone says, "It's the president." I said, president of what?
Yeah, right.
Of the United States. Like, I really liked that gag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought, I love Peter Weller, and I love to see him do his thing. And he's very young, and yet he's very assured. He's a very assured performer, and he really holds it together with all this utter madness going on. Because Lithgow is literally, just a screaming freak the whole way through it, and is just basically just given license to go out of his gourd. Whereas Weller plays the whole thing very well. Peter Weller, basically, he just plays the whole thing very Peter Weller, and he holds the whole thing together. I love watching him. I love watching him play guitar, and cornet and all that.
Well, he said he played it with a mixture of Jacques Cousteau and Adamant.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in terms of sheer invention, it's a terrific film. Just a terrific film. It's endlessly inventive. I think that you have to have completely an open mind to it to kind of, appreciate and enjoy the stuff in it. You have to completely go with it. You can't at any point double check yourself or the plot, because I have to say, I watched it today and thought, yeah, I totally got that. I totally understood that. But trying to explain it back now, I'm like, oh, okay, no, I didn't. Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the film and a lot of information you're given that I'm not even sure pans out particularly well. But the performances are endlessly enjoyable. It's a who's who of both main actors who would go on to be much bigger than they were then, but also bit parts, like the guy who is in the mental institution at the beginning, who's looking after Lithgow's character.
I love him.
He's one of the crooked guys from Beverly Hills Cop. Is it
Jonathan Banks?
Yeah, Jonathan Banks, Lizardo Hospital guard. Yeah. Jonathan Banks. You've also got, did you notice that the cop who shows up when the two hunters, that is Taggart from Beverly Hills Cop.
I noticed that one of the Hong Kong Cavaliers is the mean guard from the Shawshank Redemption.
Clancy Brown. Yeah. So
it's a proper who's who, and you're just watching it. Oh, it's that bloke. Oh, it's that bloke. Oh, it's that bloke. Oh, it's that bloke. Like, that's the whole way through.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. I mean, there really is enough there for it to be, and I'm glad it's not, but there's enough there for it to be like a 3-hour movie. There's enough going on. And it's enough characters and things you can explore.
I really, really agree with something Lithgow says in the interview as well. And it's well worth watching if you're a fan or you watch the film and you enjoy it. It's well worth watching the Q&A. But the truest thing Lithgow says about it is that for him, it is a lot more representative of comic books than most comic book films.
Yeah.
Now, that's almost certainly not true now, although I've never been a massive comic book person. I'm sure they're all a lot more gritty and all that sort of thing now. But how I understand comic books, it has that real, joyful lack of submission to the laws of storytelling and science and all that sort of thing. Like, it doesn't bother needing to take you to it doesn't bother holding your hand to take you to a particular place. It just says, here we are, and this is the way the world is, kind of a thing.
No, I love the idea of a group of, I just like the idea of having a main character where they're like, well, he could be a brain surgeon, he could be a adventurer, he can be a musician, he can be all these different things. I love the idea that he drives around in a bus with a bunch of crazy people. I don't know why Jeff Goldblum is called New Jersey but is dressed head to toe in a cowboy outfit, but I love it. I don't know why that would be, but it's great. And the most famous example of the what the hell is going on kind of bit is the watermelon, which is where they walk through this science laboratory, and there's all this stuff hanging up and built and all the rest of it, and then there's this bloody great watermelon in the middle of this machine, and Jeff Goldblum's like, well, what's the watermelon? And the guy who's with says, who I believe is the Nevada guy, Reno, Nevada, he says, oh, I'll tell you later. And it's, that's a prime example of where, and it's almost what Gilliam does without he never has someone actual comment on it, but it's this idea of set dressing just being this interesting and organic thing, rather than just the idea of, well, it's a science laboratory, so it's got to look like a science laboratory, or it's a spaceship, so it's got to look like a spaceship. There's more thought put into it. There's more world building going on. There's more creativity.
And they've all had a lot of fun with it as well.
Yeah, oh no, tons of fun. I mean, I'm not overthinking it. It's just really, really, it's barrels along. There's never really a slow bit in it. The acting is superb. The characters are weird and wonderful. The soundtrack is ace. I can completely understand why people want more of it. But to me, it's not so. I couldn't single it out. To me, I've said that it sits alongside Big Trouble in Little China and movies like that. And it's certainly one of the most successful fantasy, comedy, action movies of the 80s, definitely alongside those things. But, it's not one I'll definitely throw in all the time, but it's definitely one that I enjoyed and liked and appreciated.
And if you are, if you are interested in the Woods and Weller journey, then it is, because I wasn't sure about doing it, but I think it definitely has to be watched.
Oh, it's one of, if you ask a movie geek, it's one of Weller's quintessential titles, along with RoboCop, or Naked Lunch. They're really the three that he'll ever be known for. So that it definitely has to be watched if into the whole Woods and Weller thing. And like you say, man, I have I watched this one more recently, The Badge of the Assassin, but yeah, Weller is where it's at for me, man. The more I watch Weller, the more I'm just digging on him in an insanely positive way.
I tweeted you and Jim like some scenes from Dexter that he did that I just thought were absolutely spectacular, like really, really, really good. And I would kill to write a movie for Weller just to be told, right, you've got Peter Weller and he's going to do a film. Really, write him something like that would just be spectacular, because he's that kind of actor. He's someone you could write a movie for. And to be fair, I think Jimmy Woods is as well. I think you could really, and kind of the great tragedy. The great tragedy. It is so not a great tragedy, but the slight sort of reservation I have about Woods' career is that so many times it's been he's the maverick sort of cop or lawyer or whatever it is. There's a lot of copy, or unhinged kind of roles in there. And I think he's capable of a lot more than that. I think he's capable of being very funny. I think he's capable of doing something a lot more nuanced as well, if he had the right director and the right script.
Well, the closest he gets to doing anything even near the weirdness of Weller, because look, let's be fair, the movies we've covered with Weller in is a weird bunch. I mean, there isn't one. You look at Leviathan and Shakedown and Naked Lunch and Buckaroo Banzai and RoboCop. I mean, and of Unknown Origin. It's a weird bunch of movies. Whereas you look at what Woods has done, and you're right, it's cops and lawyers basically throughout the whole thing. And the closest he gets to doing anything as weird as Weller is vampires, John Carpenter's Vampires. But even in that, he's still playing like just an action hero. He never gets to sink his teeth into the sheer cacophony of madness that Weller's got to do.
Yeah, but I would say that it's been really, really great watching their movies, because I think in terms of Woods, movies like True Believer are just they are things which I missed. I totally missed. I didn't see them in Star Video. I never got them out. I never watched them, and it's been brilliant seeing some of those movies. Things like True Believer, things like Blue Jean Cop. These are it's been so wonderful to go back and watch some proper 80s films that I completely passed me by, and they had a really brilliant 80s like vitality and fun to them. And then there's been really, there's been the sort of more interesting out the way stuff, like the Woods one about him being the convict, and and of Unknown Origin. I mean, of Unknown Origin was just completely mad in every respect, and I still can't get over that rat that looks exactly like a beaver. I mean, it's probably like he was fighting a beaver at sometimes.
Or a small child.
Properly great actors of a kind that, you know, and it's been really interesting the way that they have done, because what I'll be interested to see with Keaton and Koto, and it might not be Keaton and Koto, we'll have to look at it, because what's been great about Woods and Weller is that they've had so many leading roles. Yeah. Like lots and lots of films that aren't super famous and aren't the most amazing thing in the world, but they have the lead. They're not supporting. They're not constantly doing loads and loads of supporting roles. They regularly get leading roles in mad, weird little films. And it's great.
I have to ask you a question now then. Way back when we did the Robert Mitchum episode, you were obviously singing the praises of the 70s, which is obviously a very well-known decade for, you know, the grandmasters of American cinema, Scorsese and the like. But has doing the Woods and Weller series made you debate the beauty of the 80s?
Well, it's
a sillier decade. It's a sillier decade.
It's a much sillier decade. Because the 70s, the kind of 70s cinema I love is the Last Detail, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm basically just going to name a load of Jack Nicholson films, basically because Jack Nicholson just ruled the 70s like some kind of mad, bleak king. But what's been great, it has helped me remember what I really, really love about the 80s, which is it's all about entertainment and being as entertaining as humanly possible, and to the expense of grittiness and realism, and because a lot of the films we've seen have had you just would not get away with now in terms of their flights of fancy that they take. And
right. But also it wasn't like the 80s was suddenly a decade that was afraid of, I mean, when you mean grittiness, I think you mean more like sort of seriousness in the sense, because plenty of 80s movies, there's still gore and grue and, gooey stuff in them in terms of visceral or violent scenery. Look at something like RoboCop, it's chock full of really gruesome, gory stuff.
Right, yeah.
So, but I mean, if anything, the thing that I miss the entertainment. I miss being able to say, you know what, it might have some bad bits in it, but I know if I put in a movie from the 80s, 75% of it is going to entertain me with a big grin on my face. And I also miss the fact that I miss that era where the movies were made where they had a slightly older audience in mind, where you could have a big fantasy epic, but there would either be intelligent dialogue in it, sex in it, or gore in it. And it was never dark themes or dark ideas, or if you shot someone, you saw that person get shot. There wasn't this idea that we're going to expend, 5,000 bullets and never actually see them hit anyone. It was just a much better. Like, it just makes me, when I watch movies today, and I've seen some good movies this year. I've got a healthy list of movies that I've seen this year that I really did like, but none of them come close, man, to the ones that we've been doing on the. I think of the Joe Dante episode. I think of the Woods and Weller episodes. We've really seen a handful of just awesomely entertaining 80s films.
Yeah, and the 80s could still be. Could still produce, because you think about something like Videodrome. That is a bleak ass film in every respect. But I think the particular thing I've got from it is I love Peter Weller in absolutely everything, that I've really got that from this. Second of all, that particular brand of like 80s. I mean, there's more to say about it, but I would just call it 80s fun of the Blue Jean Cop and all that sort of area. It's been really great to see them again. And it also reminded me again about the 90s as well. There were things like Screamers, and The Hard Way and things like that. Those were films that I love from my own, getting to love movies upbringing. And it's been great to look at them again, because Screamers and The Hard Way are two classic Star rentals.
It spills over into the 90s, definitely spills over into the 90s.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been magnificent to do WW. And I'm definitely keen on KK, but we have to... I think Keaton is definitely there because he has had a lot of leading roles.
Well, check Koto's filmography and see what you think.
I will. Because Kilmer's a definite candidate, but I have to admit it was the weak half because he annoys me in so much stuff, Kilmer, so I just don't know whether...
For example, I would love to do Real Genius, but I have no interest in doing The Doors. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
And I have no interest in doing his Batman movies, and
no.
So I mean,
but he's done a shitload of films. Is the only thing. I mean, he's done so many films, so there is quite a lot to choose from. So we'll have a look and we'll figure out what's best.
Definitely. But no, I mean, last thing on Buckaroo Banzai. Look, I would definitely urge people to watch it. Definitely urge people to look into it. I'm sorry if we haven't got as in depth or as geeky or as nerdy or whatever as I'm sure other shows have done on the subject. It wasn't really my intention to do that. It was more my intention just to sort of sing the praises of a movie, which, just is it's a good, fun. You can't put your finger on why exciting film that. Just never get made today. Everything today is so formulaic in comparison, and also it's one of the few occasions where, without it being a Monty Python or a Kids in the Hall or something like that, it's one of the few occasions where two friends have come up with a world and a character and some people, and been allowed to put that together, cast it and make the film. Now, there was producer interference and they lost their cinematographer, and they weren't allowed to do certain things they wanted to do, and it wasn't, when it came around to marketing, the marketing company were like, well, we don't know what to do with this, and yada yada yada. But it's rare, unless you're an established comedy group or an established director actor partnership, to have something like a Richter and a Rauch coming together, two guys that have corresponded by letter or whatever, come up with this crazy world, crazy idea, and they're just able to do it. They're just able to put it out there. And that I would celebrate. That I would easily celebrate.
I would definitely celebrate it, yeah. So have a look.
Yeah, have a look, enjoy, and read up on it, folks, because there is a plenty to delve into.
Meanwhile, in Blighty, it is coming up on 2:30 in the morning, so...
All right, so yes, thanks ever so much for putting Woods and Weller finally to rest. There is a lot more out there, so I will urge people to once. This is our Woods and Weller series is merely the tip of an iceberg, merely a soupçon of Woods Weller genius. So delve more and look out at things like that. And who knows, we might be back with Men and Women of Seduction or whatever that fucking thing is that they're both in. I feel we should cover that, but. I will never see Star Trek, though, as we've discussed before. So.
Yes, yeah. Cool, man.
Anyway.
All right, well, it's been lovely as always. And,
yes, man.
Love to New Yorkers.
When you walked out
Like the show? Well, you can find our complete podcast archive over at amdpodcast.blogspot.com or aftermoviediner.com. You can send us an email at aftermoviediner@gmail.com, tweet us at aftermoviediner, or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/aftermoviediner. Or why not be a part of the show and leave us a voicemail over at speakpipe.com/aftermoviediner. You can also support the show a number of ways, by spreading the word to family, friends and co-workers, by writing us a review over at iTunes or TalkShoe, by purchasing some excellent diner merchandise over at cafepress.com/aftermoviediner, by donating on our website, by advertising with our website, or maybe you're a regular Amazon user. If so, then before you make a purchase, go to amdpodcast.blogspot.com, aftermoviediner.blogspot.com, or aftermoviediner.com and click through the Amazon banner ads. It costs you nothing extra, but they throw us a few coins for the trouble. Or, like the movies we cover, then buy them over at our personal Amazon store, also on amdpodcast.blogspot.com. Really, thanks everybody for everything you continue to do, and please keep listening.
There are men. And then there are second unit podcast men. The podcast you've just been listening to is part of the Second Unit Podcast Network. Find all of our shows at 2upn.blogspot.com or on Facebook under the Second Unit Podcast Network. Our fantastic list of shows include Drunk on VHS, We Came from the Basement, No Budget Nightmares, The After Movie Diner, Dr. Action and the Kick-Ass Kid, and Bloodbaths and Boomsticks. Take one podcast into the shower. Don't be a blithering idiot, Alan. We can give you the multiple podcast cleansing system all in one place that your hair deserves. Our programming is available across all platforms, from iTunes to Podomatic, TalkShoe to Stitcher, so you have absolutely no excuse. Listen today, and a free naked person of your choice will be shipped from Thailand to your door in a matter of weeks. The Second Unit Podcast Network, bringing you the action and leaving the boring stuff to the other guys. Bloody hell. Who does a girl have to blow around here to get a decent beverage?